What happens when a billionaire walks into City Hall, not to make a deal, but to run the whole city? Ethan Caldwell had made his first million before 30, his second before 32. By 45, his face was on the covers of business magazines, a golden boy of urban redevelopment. Skyscrapers that once lived only in digital renderings now cast long shadows across the city's riverfront thanks to his vision. The locals called them the Caldwell Towers, even though their real names were plastered in corporate logos. He had what most men wanted and few ever held: wealth, respect, and control. But he also had something rarer: resentment from those who remembered a different version of the city. One where families could afford to live downtown. Where mom-and-pop shops lined the brick streets instead of polished glass storefronts selling espresso machines that cost more than rent. So when Mayor Denise Langston announced she wouldn't seek re-election due to illness, few expected Ethan to throw his name into the ring. What did a man with 3 yachts and a private elevator need with public service? He never answered that question directly. At his press conference, he simply said, "This city gave me everything. It's time I gave something back." People bought it. The campaign was swift, shiny, and suspiciously well-funded. His opponent, a retired teacher with deep community ties, couldn't compete with drone-shot commercials and high-profile endorsements. The vote wasn't even close. His first weeks in office were quiet. Strategic. Ethan kept his head down, studying the budgets like he was back at Yale, highlighting numbers, circling deficits. Unlike his predecessors, he didn't make grand promises. He made appointments to the Housing Board, the Economic Redevelopment Council, the Zoning Committee. His people. Then came the Alder Street project. Alder Street was 6 blocks of century-old row houses, most still occupied by low-income families. The city had tried for years to renovate the area without success. Ethan saw opportunity. A plan emerged: tear down the deteriorating homes and replace them with mixed-use complexes, luxury condos up top, retail spaces below. The proposal would increase tax revenue by millions. Investors were already salivating. But it wasn't just a real estate decision. It was a moral fork in the road. His chief of staff, Marisol Jimenez, handed him a folder one morning. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Children with crayon drawings of their houses, grandmothers pleading in broken English, veterans who had lived on Alder Street since returning from war. Real lives, real roots. "You tear this down," Marisol said softly, "you tear their world down with it." Ethan didn't answer. He stared out the window of City Hall at the skyline he had helped build, the metal and glass rising like monuments to ambition. That night, he didn't go home. Instead, he drove to Alder Street. Sat in his car for hours. Watched a teenager carry groceries up a stoop. Saw a man fix a broken porch light. Smelled tamales through an open window. It wasn't just concrete and wood. It was history. Messy, inconvenient, and profoundly human. He returned to his penthouse past midnight. The city looked different from up high, quieter, cleaner. But that was the problem, wasn't it? Up here, everything looked clean. Simple. Profitable. Down there, it was something else. The following morning, Ethan arrived at City Hall in jeans and a black sweater, not his usual tailored suit. Marisol raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He nodded once, an unspoken "let it go," and went straight to his office, door shut. He spent the next 4 hours on calls. Not with developers or council members, but with tenants. He dialed numbers from the folder she'd given him: Lucia Morales, who ran a daycare out of her home; Frank Bellamy, a retired firefighter with 2 bad knees; Jamal and Shanice, raising 3 kids in a 2-bedroom apartment they'd lived in since their wedding. Each call stretched longer than expected. No one yelled. Most were cautious. Some were surprised. All were real. That afternoon, he convened the housing committee. Cameras weren't allowed. Ethan stood at the head of the long mahogany table and, without fanfare, shredded the glossy renderings of the new Alder proposal. "We're not tearing it down," he said. A beat of silence. Then Councilwoman Dyer leaned forward. "You're scrapping the entire project." "I'm pausing it. We'll find a solution that keeps the residents where they are. Revitalize, not replace." Someone laughed, quietly, disbelieving. But Marisol didn't. She studied him the way someone studies a stranger they once thought they knew. After the meeting, the backlash came fast. Investors pulled out. The local business journal ran an op-ed titled, "Mayor Caldwell, Visionary or Sentimental Fool?" A prominent developer called his office and left a message, "You're playing politics with progress. We'll remember that." The next few weeks were a grind. Ethan met with nonprofits, historians, architects who specialized in preservation. He brought in grant writers to seek federal funding, not for sleek condos, but for home repairs and historical designations. The city council was split, some saw it as noble, others as naive. Meanwhile, Marisol grew quieter. She watched him during meetings, but they no longer had their long post-evening debriefs. One Friday evening, as the office cleared out, he called her in. "You disagree," he said. "I think you're trying to rewrite who you are," she replied, evenly. "But this city's memory is long, Ethan. People remember what you've taken, not just what you try to give back." He didn't argue. Just nodded. She left without saying goodnight. That weekend, Ethan drove back to Alder Street. This time he knocked on doors. Had cafecito with Lucia. Sat on Frank's porch. Let Jamal show him the garden they'd built in the alley. By Sunday night, he had mud on his shoes and 3 handwritten thank you notes in his pocket. It was the first time he'd felt useful in months. Then came Monday, and with it, the scandal. A leak. An anonymous whistleblower emailed documents to every major outlet, plans from Caldwell Development Corporation for a luxury hotel just 2 blocks from Alder. The signatures were his, dated from 6 months before his mayoral run. The land had since been quietly acquired by shell companies. The implication was clear: his preservation plan would stabilize the neighborhood, increase the hotel's future value, and benefit him personally. Marisol stormed into his office, waving the printouts. "Tell me it's not true." "It's not," he said. "But the signatures are yours. They're old. Before I decided to run. Before any of this. You didn't divest when you ran for office." He swallowed hard. "I didn't think I needed to. It was dormant." "It won't matter," she said. "To the press, to the people, it looks like a setup." For the first time since taking office, Ethan felt the ground shift under him. The headlines didn't mince words. Mayor's integrity under fire, conflict of interest or calculated deception. Caldwell's empire entangles City Hall. By Tuesday morning, the narrative had metastasized. Talk radio hosts dissected his motives. Late-night comedians made jabs about his charity facelift. Protesters gathered outside City Hall with signs that read, "Same old Caldwell," and "Profit over people." Inside, Ethan was unraveling. Not outwardly, he still wore the same composed mask, but something vital was fraying beneath. The worst part wasn't the accusations. It was how plausible they sounded, even to him. The land purchases had been routine once. Just another chess move. Then the campaign happened. The idea of giving back had felt like a genuine turn. But he had never severed the past from the present. And now, they were bleeding into each other. Marisol stopped speaking to him entirely. When necessary, she'd forward memos. Her absence in meetings was deafening. By Friday, the city council called for an ethics hearing. Public. Televised. That night, Ethan sat in his penthouse again. The skyline had lost its shine. He poured 2 fingers of scotch but didn't drink it. Instead, he picked up his phone and dialed an old number. "Gabe," he said when the line picked up. "It's Ethan." A pause. "Well," Gabe said slowly, "that's a name I haven't heard since you iced me out of our own damn company. I need help." Another pause. Then, "What kind of help?" "Legal. Strategic. Moral." A dry laugh. "Pick one." Ethan didn't flinch. "Come to City Hall. Monday. Noon." He hung up. Gabe Morales had been his co-founder 15 years ago, back when they both still had student loans and ideas that didn't involve offshore accounts. They'd built Caldwell Development from scratch, until a buyout offer had turned into a betrayal. Ethan had taken the money. Gabe had taken the high road. When Monday came, Gabe arrived in a wrinkled blazer and beat-up loafers. His eyes scanned the place like a detective returning to a crime scene. "You look like hell," he said, sitting without invitation. Ethan didn't argue. He handed over the documents, every scrap of financial history, property transfer, timeline. Gabe read in silence for 20 minutes. You didn't break the law, he said finally. But you did break trust. And in politics, that's worse. Ethan leaned forward. Can we fix it? Gabe met his eyes. Depends. Are you trying to save your seat, or your soul? Ethan didn't answer. Not yet. The hearing was set for Thursday. It would be public, loud, and ruthless. By Tuesday, Gabe had drafted a plan. It wasn't defensive. It was surgical. You'll go on record. Name every property. Every financial tie. Publish it all. Make it so transparent it hurts. They'll crucify me. Maybe, Gabe said. But at least you'll be honest when they do. That night, Ethan called Marisol. I'm testifying. Full disclosure. No lawyers spinning it. Just the truth. She was quiet. Then, you'll lose everything. Not everything, he said. Not if I do this right. For the first time in weeks, she came back to his office. Sat across from him. Watched him for a long time. If you lie, she said, I'll be the one to call the press. He nodded. I wouldn't blame you. The hearing room was packed, press cameras perched like vultures, every seat taken, every whisper sharp-edged. The counsel sat in a line of stiff suits and political poker faces. Ethan Caldwell walked in without entourage, no prepared statement in hand. Just a worn leather folder and eyes that had finally stopped searching for an exit. The chairperson, a graying woman with a reputation for scalding cross-examinations, opened with the expected formalities. Then, without preamble, she began. Mr. Mayor, are you aware of the perception that you personally benefited from decisions made by your administration? Yes, Ethan said. I understand how it looks. Do you deny financial ties to the shell corporations that acquired the land near Alder Street? I do not deny the past ties, he said. But I had no knowledge of their activity during my term. Those entities were inactive when I filed to run. That's my failure, I didn't close the door behind me. He opened the folder. Began handing out copies. Full spreadsheets. Property deeds. Email exchanges. Not just the documents the press had leaked, more. Everything. I'm not asking you to believe I'm clean, he said. I'm asking you to see all of it. Some council members looked confused. Others intrigued. The chairperson leaned back, lips pursed. And why now, she asked. Because it's not about whether I get to keep my title, Ethan replied. It's about whether I'm the kind of man who deserves it. It wasn't a mic drop moment. No cheers. Just an uneasy silence that settled like fog. Afterward, he stepped out to the waiting microphones, eyes squinting in the flashlights. I don't know what the council will decide, he told reporters. But I made choices that blurred lines. That was wrong. I'm not defending those choices. I'm trying to grow past them. That night, Gabe and Marisol sat in his office, reviewing fallout. The headlines were mixed, some called it a redemption arc, others a political suicide note. But the tone was shifting. The public wasn't sure what to do with a rich man who admitted fault without spinning it. You could still be removed, Marisol said. I know, Ethan said. You might also be re-elected. He shook his head. I don't want to campaign. Not now. Then what? I want to finish what I started on Alder. No more headlines. Just the work. That weekend, he returned to the street. This time, no security detail. Just Ethan, in old sneakers, hauling lumber and trash bags. Kids watched from stoops, whispering. Some joined him. Others didn't. Lucia handed him a broom. You look different, she said. He smiled. Feel different. A week passed. Then two. Quietly, the ethics committee released their decision, no evidence of corruption. But a formal reprimand for lack of transparency. Some wanted more blood. Others saw enough. In the end, Ethan stayed in office, but something had shifted. He stopped attending ribbon cuttings. No more photo shoots. No gala fundraisers. Instead, he held meetings on porches. Worked on zoning reforms that prioritized tenants over landlords. Proposed a land trust program to keep homes in the hands of families who lived there. Fewer people talked about him, but more talked to him. One afternoon, as he was helping Frank Bellamy plant a new maple in the front yard, Frank paused, leaned on his shovel, and asked, "So, what made you come down from that glass castle of yours?" Ethan thought about it. The towers, the money, the lonely victories. The moment it had all started to rot inside. "Maybe," he said quietly, "I finally figured out what I was building." By late summer, Alder Street had become more than a neighborhood, it was a symbol. Not of gentrification or nostalgia, but of reckoning. The city started paying attention, not to Ethan Caldwell the millionaire, but to what his hands were doing now. He'd set up a revolving fund, seeding it with a sizable portion of his personal assets. It wasn't charity, it was repair. Homes were being retrofitted, not replaced. Families stayed rooted. The skyline no longer felt like a wall between the past and future. It was becoming a bridge. But not everyone was on board. One morning, as Ethan walked into City Hall, a man was waiting near the security checkpoint. Dressed clean but plainly, mid-50s, hands calloused. "You cost me $500,000, the man said without introduction. Ethan stopped. "Excuse me." "Alder," the man said. "I own 3 of those row houses. I was counting on that buyout. Now the city's capped rents, froze my permits. You ruined me." Ethan looked at him, searching for something in his eyes, truth, blame, maybe just grief. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't want your apology. I want my money." Ethan didn't flinch. "I understand. I hope you get what you need." The man stepped back, eyes cold. "We all pay, Caldwell. One way or another." It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. And it stayed with him. That week, Gabe called. "You're not sleeping," he said flatly. "I can hear it in your voice." "I don't deserve to," Ethan replied. "Maybe not. But you can't fix a city from a hospital bed. You need to take care of yourself." Ethan exhaled. "I keep wondering, am I just doing all this to erase what I was?" "No," Gabe said. "You're doing it because you finally looked in the mirror and didn't like what stared back. That's not erasure. That's evolution." A silence passed between them. Then Ethan said, "You still think about the company?" "All the time. But not with regret. Just memory." That night, Marisol showed up at his apartment. She hadn't visited in months. "I heard about the guy in the lobby," she said. "News travels fast. I want you to understand something," she continued. "Redemption doesn't mean safety. It doesn't buy forgiveness. It just means you're not pretending anymore." Ethan nodded. "I'm not." She sat across from him. "I believe that now. That's why I want to talk to you about something bigger." She laid a folder on the table. It wasn't city planning. It was statewide. Policy reforms. Affordable housing bills. Infrastructure strategy. "You're talking about running," he said. "No," she corrected. "I'm talking about you running. Governor." He froze. "I'm barely holding on to this office." "Exactly. And doing it with integrity. You're building trust. That's rare. I have enemies. You have scars. That's better." Ethan didn't sleep that night. He walked his penthouse in circles, looked out over the city that had once been a playground and now felt like sacred ground. Governor. It sounded absurd. Tempting. Dangerous. He thought of Alder Street. Of Frank, Lucia, Jamal. Of the men in the lobby. Of Gabe's voice on the phone. And then he thought of himself, not who he'd been, but who he might still become. Ethan didn't announce anything right away. He returned to his routines, community meetings, policy huddles, long drives through neighborhoods that still bore the bruises of past neglect. But everywhere he went, the question followed, "Are you running?" He didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, he focused on Alder Street, which had become both symbol and sanctuary. The transformation was real: refurbished stoops, repaired roofs, neighbors organizing cleanup days. The city began replicating the model elsewhere. Other streets. Other forgotten corners. But then came the fire. It started in a boarded-up building just a block from Alder. By the time firefighters arrived, 3 homes were already scorched. No fatalities, but Frank's place was gone, reduced to ashes in the space of an hour. Ethan got there before dawn, smoke still rising in low, bitter plumes. Frank stood outside, wrapped in a donated blanket, eyes red not from tears but from disbelief. They say it was electrical, someone whispered. Others weren't so sure. Some claimed to have seen a man running, face masked, minutes before the flames. There were murmurs of arson. Retaliation. Ethan stood with Frank, his coat flecked with ash. He didn't speak. Just stayed beside him. Later that day, he went back to City Hall and called a press conference. Not to speculate, not to spin, but to act. I will personally fund the rebuilding of Mr. Bellamy's home, he announced. And starting today, the city will launch a security and support initiative for every revitalized neighborhood. Reporters peppered him with questions. Is this politically motivated? No. Are you running for governor? A pause. Long enough to be noticed. I don't know yet, he said honestly. But I know that this city has taught me how little power means without purpose. That night, his inbox exploded. Donations, volunteers, letters, some angry, but many hopeful. One in particular stood out. Dear Mayor Caldwell. You were not always a good man. You might still not be. But I see what you're trying to be now. I see it because I've tried too. Keep going. Anonymous. It wasn't signed, no return address. But it hit harder than anything the council or the press had ever said. A week later, Gabe flew back into town. Marisol joined them at Ethan's place. They sat around the kitchen island like war strategists. I've taken your temperature, Marisol said. You've got support. Reluctant, but real. You're not the underdog. You're the question mark. And people vote for question marks now? Ethan asked. They vote for whoever feels more human than the alternative. Gabe laid out a roadmap, where to start, what districts to focus on, how to speak without sounding rehearsed. Ethan listened, then stood and walked to the window. The skyline glittered under the moonlight. It no longer looked like something he owned. It looked like something he owed. He turned back to them. If I do this, he said, we do it the same way I fixed Alder. Block by block. Face by face. No champagne fundraisers. No billionaires in backrooms. Marisol smiled. That's either political suicide or the start of something honest. Maybe both, Gabe added. Ethan exhaled. The weight wasn't gone. But it felt different now. Less like a noose, more like armor. Then let's begin, he said. The campaign launched quietly. No fanfare, no national headlines. Just a video filmed on a cracked sidewalk in Alder Street, Ethan sitting next to Frank, their shoulders brushing. I'm not here to promise perfection, he said, looking into the lens. I've already failed too publicly for that. But I've learned that leadership isn't about legacy, it's about service. If you'll let me, I want to serve this whole state the way I've tried to serve this street. The video went viral. Not because it was flashy, but because it was raw. It was a millionaire with calluses. A politician with shadows. From there, the campaign became something strange and rare, personal. Volunteers came not from political circles but neighborhoods. Farmers in upstate towns. Nurses in rural clinics. Former critics. Even a few rivals. Ethan refused corporate money. Gabe set up a grassroots platform. Marisol ran communications like a field medic, blunt, fast, fiercely loyal. And yet, the ghosts didn't disappear. One evening, as the campaign bus pulled into a small town outside the capital, Ethan saw a man waiting by the roadside. Same coat, same cold eyes. The man from City Hall's lobby. You still think money fixes everything? The man asked. No, Ethan said, stepping down. But maybe listening helps. The man didn't smile. Didn't stay. Just nodded once and walked away. Later that night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He stood outside the motel, the stars smeared by light pollution. He thought about all the people he'd once stepped over to build his towers. All the shortcuts. The silence he'd paid for. You don't outrun your past. You learn to walk with it. The final debate was brutal. His opponent, a polished career politician, called him a reformed wolf in populist wool. Accused him of moral grandstanding, of convenient awakenings. Ethan didn't deflect. "I don't blame anyone for doubting me," he said. "I earned that. But here's the truth, I spent half my life trying to climb over people to get to the top. I won. And I was miserable. Then I climbed back down, and started building something worth keeping." Election day came like a storm, hopeful, tense, unpredictable. The results weren't immediate. For hours, the numbers seesawed. In the end, he won by just under 2%. There was no confetti, no champagne. Just a deep, shaky breath and a long embrace from Marisol and Gabe. Frank called the next morning. "Governor," he said, voice rough with pride. "Don't let that title make you soft." "I won't," Ethan said. "It's not the title that matters." Later, he stood on the steps of the state capitol for the first time. The building was old, proud, weighed down by history. He looked out over the crowd, not aides or donors, but people. So many people. "This isn't a story about a millionaire who found redemption," he said quietly, half to himself. "This is a story about a city that gave a broken man a second chance. And about what he chose to do with it." No one heard him say it. But maybe that was the point. Sometimes, the most important words are the ones spoken only once, and meant.